being able to be flexible and attend what's necessary to keep up your registration as a foster carer once you've become a foster carer. And everyone, of course, in your household needs to be open and ready to go and wanting to be part of and the foster care experience. So if you do come to us and get assessed and become a foster carer, this is the sort of support that you can expect from Life Without Barriers. I'll start at the top at the 24/7 support. We've got a 24/7 on-call support line for all of our foster carers, whether they be general or specialist. And that is run by our child and family practitioners on a rotational basis, and also overseen by on-call managers. That is a telephone support for the most part. It's not we run out to be with you, but we can be on the phone with you for hours and hours if necessary and give you the guidance and support that you require. Obviously, a care team approach. So there are lots of people involved in a young person's life that comes into foster care, from the Department of Child Protection to therapists and families and all sorts of people, and your child and family practitioner. So the care team, everybody meets together to talk about the child's needs. So being involved in that. We have a clinical team that's directly attached to our foster care program. For specialist foster carers and children, that clinical team is able to do one-on-one sessions and provide therapy and assessment support. For our general children, there's a consultation arm of our clinical team that's able to consult on matters and provide support and recommendations around what's required. There is a reimbursement for our for foster carers. General foster care, it's considered a reimbursement in terms of out-of-pocket costs. For general foster care, they also pay for extracurricular activities and most of school equipment and things like that, so that you're not out of pocket as a foster carer completely. Obviously, as I said before, there's a much higher reimbursement for specialist foster carers because we ask a lot more of them. We've got the Employee Assistance Program. If you are employed in the human services and other areas, you will be familiar with employee assistance, but that's for short intervention for your families in terms of quick crisis intervention therapy for major events and things like that. We have a lot of social events. Not so many while COVID was going on, but we are building those events again now that we're able to move around a little freer in South Australia here. Currently, we are planning in school holiday events and a massive day happening out at Monarto Safari Park for all of our foster carers and children, which we get together. And we do throughout the year try and put on a number of events to build community and connection between our carers. Obviously, we provide respite because some of you may become respite carers, and we try our very best to provide respite where it's required. We obviously have ongoing learning and development in terms of carers training, and that's both online and face-to-face, online live webinars like this in terms of information sessions and further training, trauma and attachment training. And also we have a platform for our carers called My Learning, which is online internet-based modules that you will be asked to complete as part of a learning and development plan that's developed as you become foster carers. So the process of becoming a foster carer is a three-stage process. Obviously, first of all is the inquiry stage, which you've all just can put a tick next to that because you've just started it. You are now part of the inquiry stage. And so it starts with the information night. And then if you fill in that call me back form, you'll have a phone interview with our national team to complete a few sort of critical points of information that are required before we can move forward. And then you'll get passed on to, normally we would have our carer engagement officer here in South Australia as part of this to introduce herself. But Cherie is our carer engagement officer. She will then, once the phone interview's done, it gets passed to Cherie, who will then contact you to have a bit more of a more local talk around what your needs are and how to meet them. For the Mount Gambier attendees tonight, we have a couple of practitioners and an assessor out in Mount Gambier who would do the job that Cherie would do. But she comes out, gives you lots of forms and extra information, some links and information packs around what to expect, and kind of holds on to you and guides you into the initial training, orientation training, which is the next one, which is a 2-day course called Shared Lives, which needs to be done before we can move into the assessment space. So Cherie looks after you right through that particular process, and answers any questions and is your point of contact in Life Without Barriers until you move into the assessment phase. Then we've got this screening phase, which is what Cherie also does. So she'll bring out the application form or send it to you on email. There's police clearances and child protection checks, which are 2 very different checks. One obviously looks at the police system. In South Australia, the police system and the child protection system don't link up. So there's another check that happens from the child protection perspective as well. Then there are health checks, which are done self checks by you as the carer applicant, and a doctor's report, just a quick, visit to your local GP to get them if there's any medical issues. If you do have underlying health issues, that does not preclude you from being considered as a foster carer. It's about how those issues are managed and whether or not your health professionals say that you are definitely in a position that they would support you as a foster carer. And then the other thing that we do in the early stages is a household safety check, just to let you know, obviously we're looking after somebody else's children, and the Department of Child Protection is the guardian of those children. So there's a higher duty of care to make sure that children are kept and looked after in a safe environment. So we go through, Cherie generally would be the person that comes and does your initial household safety check, just to let you know anything that might be, like if you've got a pool fence that's kind of half falling down, or you've got a spa out the back it's got a cover on it but it's not quite meeting the recommendations, those sort of things. You'll get pointed out to say these are things that will need to be fixed along the assessment road, so that when we get to the point of submitting to the department for approval, we can say that all of those things in your safety check are all fixed, or going to provide the proof that they're going to be fixed. Once all of that's done, Cherie then hands you over to an assessor who will then look after you right through to approval. And that's the interview stage, which is, again, where your availability, how fast this process goes depends on your availability. There are several assessment interviews, which are home visits to you. If you've got children, there's a sort of a session with your children and yourselves to talk about, foster care and a number of steps that we have to go through to write up a report to demonstrate that you've got the skills and capacity to become foster carers. Then the assessor will go away and they'll write up quite a comprehensive assessment that they've looked and seen and made their recommendations for approval. And those get sent through to the Department of Child Protection, the Carer Approval. They're now called the Carer Approval and Review Unit, not Registration Unit, but that once it goes to them, they're the final sayers that provide the final certificate to say that you're an approved foster carer. How long does it take? Well, it really depends on how long it takes for the trainings to be done. So your availability is really critical at this point. If you're able and flexible to attend the trainings that are required, to be available for the assessment interviews, sometimes we can get that done really, really quickly, you know, within 6 weeks sometimes, and then the write-up a couple of weeks, and we're off and running. And that's the way we love to do it. But obviously, COVID sort of slowed things down quite a lot in terms of being able to do training and being able to get out for assessments and things like that. But we do, once you hit the screening stage, which is in terms of writing up all of those applications and clearances, we aim to submit an assessment for approval within 3 months. So from the moment, I think those timeframes we're trying to get down as quickly as we want, because for foster carers as well, if you're here listening to me talk and getting really excited and enthusiastic about being part of the foster care program, what we really want to do is capitalize on that enthusiasm really early and get you moving through, because if things start to take a longer time, it starts to become quite laborious. So we do try our very best to move as quickly as we can, and that does often depend on you and your availability. So is it the right time for you? Do you have time to commit to the training, which is, we do provide it in all sorts of formats now, online and face-to-face. We also, you know, do you have time for someone to come and visit you in those assessment interviews? And are there other people in your home and members of your family in a good place to really support you in this journey to become foster carers? And have you processed any challenges that you've had in your life? Quite often we find this journey to discover whether or not foster care is for you, and it's something that you want to do. A lot of people are driven by experiences that have brought them to us, and what we need to make sure is that you've moved through those experiences in a really positive way and are able to give back from your experiences, and that is something that we do explore with you, with our assessors, to see where you're at. And obviously, the more experience that you have in that space, the more that you're able to provide a really understanding and reflective home for our children. So that, I've done lots of talking. I'm going to start throwing to Kristy to start answering questions and whatnot once we get through the frequently asked, or as we go through the frequently asked questions. But I do want to thank you again for being here, and certainly encourage you to look at our website and follow us up on social media, and tell your friends about us as well. So now if I just go into... again, Kristy's been very expertly cutting and pasting the link for the Call Me Back forms into the chat box. I think there's also a link with regard to some foster care stories as well that perhaps somebody will put in there. Can I foster children that are older than my child? I will get to that one in just a moment. That is a question that we will ask. It certainly is a possibility, yes. So the frequently asked questions, I'll just go quickly, and I'm going to get Kristy to answer these because I'm sure you're sick of hearing my voice. Can I take a foster care child on holidays? Kristy.
Short answer, yes, absolutely. Depending on how far you want to go can complicate it. If you wanted to go overseas, then the agency, DCP, need to know well in advance to organise passports, to get approval, all of that. And sometimes it's not possible, but it's well worth asking the question and having that explored. If it's interstate, in most cases, DCP, the caseworker, just need to know where, when, where you'll be staying, where you'll be travelling, who you might be staying with. If it's just locally, then yeah, absolutely. It's a lovely normal part of a childhood that we want to provide for these kids.
Absolutely. Next question. Do I get to choose which school they go to?
You can contribute to the discussion. It's different in every situation. Depending on where the child is at school when they get removed, if they're already school age, it's great to be able to provide that consistency for a child to stay if they've got a supportive school environment. But in some cases, it's actually really helpful for them to have a fresh start in a new school environment. DCP will consider if your children are going to a certain school, whether it would be better for the child to move to the same school that your family's involved in. Also, sometimes you will have information on a school that is better equipped to handle your foster child's needs than where DCP might like them to go. So sometimes you do need to advocate for your child in that instance. But at the end of the day, the department is the guardian of the child and they will make those final decisions. So, yeah, there's not an easy answer to that question.
Absolutely. There's all sorts of, contributing factors to the decision that's made in that one. Next one, do I get a choice in what child comes to live with us? So I can answer, I'll just answer first this question in terms of foster children that are older than my child. The general rule of thumb is that we try to match children that are younger than the youngest child in the family. But Kristy's experiences obviously shows you that we can place children that are older than our biological children. It really is a matter of really careful and considered matching to make sure that we're not putting children, like if we've got an older child than your own biological child and that child has had a negative experience, that might mean that they play or act that out on your youngest child. It makes your child more vulnerable in that space. So we do need to make considerations like that. But in general, foster care and for our general children, and quite often for our specialist children, it's not necessarily an issue. And we do talk and very carefully discuss what's in the best interests of all the children, your own biological children, but also the children that are coming into care. I don't know, Kristy, is there something else that you would add into that? Or
no, I think that covers it as far as the age. Oh, I just got plunged into darkness. My mum just turned out the lights. I will say, though, that don't be afraid that once you sign up to be a foster carer that you will be forced to take a child that you're not comfortable taking. We have had numerous phone calls asking us about children, and then Greg and I will go away and discuss it and just consider how busy our life is at the moment or whether that child would fit. There's not always complete information about each child, but the Life Without Barriers will give you as much information as they possibly can to make the best decision for your family at that time before you say yes to a child.
Yes. So the next question, are they allowed to call me mum and dad?
That's, again, different in every situation. There's no rule against it. It will depend on the age of the child, their previous experience. Often the children will come to that decision themselves in the right time, and it's more likely if they are a younger child when they come into your care. Our child, because she is a teenager, we don't expect that she will ever choose to do that, and that's absolutely fine. So yeah, it is allowed, but yeah, different in each case.
Yes, And depending on a child's experience as well, some young children come into a foster care placement and immediately start calling the people that are looking after them mum and dad, and that generally denotes that they do not and haven't had the experience of what a mum is and what a dad is in the true sense of that word. So you do find, sometimes they'll come racing in and give you the biggest hug in the world and say, "Mummy, mummy, mummy," and you've never seen the child. It's the first time meeting of the child. So there can be some situations where it's about sort of going with the flow and going what's in the best interests of the child in terms of that.
And on the flip side of that, sometimes their connotation of mum or dad is a very negative, scary thing. So it's actually better to avoid those words altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any restrictions on pets?
It is recognised that pets can have a beautiful therapeutic impact on children. But also it is recognised that pets can create dangers for children, and some children can create dangers for pets. So there's definitely supervision needed around pets, and when the assessment process happens, it will be looked at what type of pet it is, whether there's space to separate the children and the pets. So it's definitely not a deal breaker.
No, absolutely not. And that's pretty much it for the frequently asked questions. So if you've got questions yourselves, please feel free to pop them in the chat box and we will try and answer them. Sarah has asked, what is the guarantee for long term? Can the parents or family come back into their lives? What we hope in situations, Sarah, is that the family and parents are always in the child's life, even when they are in foster care. So being able to try and build some positive relationships and positive experiences for children and young people. Generally, in a long-term care situation, all options of being able to return home or to be with family have been exhausted, and the child is long-term in that person's care. If the child has been with you for a really long time and all of a sudden a relative comes out of the blue, or mum and dad come back having dealt with all of their issues, even then there's some assessment that goes around whether or not it's in that young person's best interest to be removed from somewhere where they are absolutely settled and connected and have formed strong and positive attachments. What we try to do in those situations is to build connection and community between the family members so that the young person can grow up in an extended family environment where they have access with their biological families. So there are situations a lot of the time if you choose to care for Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander children, sometimes the family network takes a long time to work out where it is, and the Aboriginal child placement principle and legislation insists that if there is family that become available to look after a child within their culture or within their kin, that has to be seriously considered. So it does change a little bit from time to time. There's no hard, fast rules on that. But what we do try to do is really speak as positively as we possibly can about creating positive experiences and positive narratives around biological family for our children. If you have an infant come into care, do you still need the spare room? Now, that's a very, very clever question, Tanya. The rule is if the child is under 2 years of age, the child is able to sleep in the main bedroom with the carer in a cot or bassinet. However, in the assessment space, that child is eventually, if you're going to have the child for a long period of time, like if the child comes into your care as an emergency and stays and is 18 months old and stays until they're 3 or 4 or even longer, you need to show that you've got a spare room for that child to be able to move into. It's a little bit negotiable, but you do need to be able to demonstrate that when necessary, a child absolutely has a room, a spare room that they're able to be placed in. Another question is, can I request more than one child, like siblings, brothers or sisters, to keep them together? Quite absolutely. Quite often it's us requesting foster carers to consider an additional child because there is a sibling group that needs to stay together. And more often than not these days, we do have a lot of siblings coming into care, and we do find it very difficult to find placements for them all in one placement, which is another reason why our Mockingbird family constellation might actually help to solve some of that, which is keeping brothers and sisters in placements that are connected in some way by community. But definitely we try our very best to keep children together and to expand the capacity of our foster carers to consider things that they might not have originally come into foster care for. And next question, if I had an older child or teenager as a foster child, what happens when they turn 18? Can they still stay with me and remain part of my family? Kristy, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, absolutely. It is ideal if they can remain part of the family, just like a biological child would after they turn 18. If we can create that, that family support as they move into adult years and beyond, that is absolutely ideal. I actually have a foster brother who came into the home after I had got married and left, and he's now 30, and he's completely part of this family, just like any of my other siblings. And being able to watch the benefits of being part of a supportive family network as he moves through his young adult years is really beautiful to see.
Yes, I have a 40-year-old foster brother who came to our family when he was 18 months old. So, and he is very much part of my family and my brother. So, yes, most definitely. Another question is, if there are young siblings being cared for together, does each child need their own room? Again, another very good question. No, if they are related children, and if there are no concerns with regard to behaviour between the two children in terms of violence or experiences of child sex abuse and things like that, the siblings can share a bedroom. It's assessed, isn't it, to some degree. Kristy, have you had that experience with more children coming in?
Yeah, yep. We've had 2 little toddler brothers that shared a room, but what really stands out to me was our first placement was a boy and a girl, 9 and 10, or 8 and 9, and they not only needed to share a room but shared a bed because that's what they were used to in the home that they were removed from. So it was recommended that we provide a double bed so that they could be together, because that's what made them feel safe, because that's what they were used to. And once they were settled in our home, then they moved into bunk beds, sharing a room. After a few months, they started fighting like normal siblings because they were comfortable over whose space was who. So, I mean, that's an extreme situation, sharing a bed. But yeah, in their home, that was the only way they felt safe because of the environment that they were in. So yeah, it's definitely viable, but obviously has to be very closely supervised and monitored and assessed depending on the children's experience.
Great. Are there any more questions? Please feel free to fill in that. We'll pop that link again in for the Call Me Back. And oh, I'm over 60. Is that too old to foster? Oh my goodness, no. No, you're in your prime, in your retirement years, to be able to provide really solid and great foster care for children and young people. I think quite there's some statistics around, and they're not there on the top of my head at the moment, but there is a majority of our foster carers are 55 years and over. It is a very common age to come into foster care because they've essentially winding back on full-time work. If they're fit and young of heart, their children have usually generally grown up and left home, and they're finding themselves in a position, most especially in the specialist space, where you're able to, really dedicate some really solid therapeutic time to raising a young person. Another question: if you care for a mildly disabled partner, can you still become a foster carer? Absolutely, Tanya. We are not about disability. We're all about ability in Life Without Barriers, and we absolutely need to make sure that, of course, everything and everyone is safe, but that would not preclude you from assessment at all. It's about what your support networks are, what your fallbacks are in situations that might be a little, complex, or emergency situations. If there's a good, strong demonstration that, you've got everything sort of tied up and in place to manage all kinds of situations and got a good support network around you, there would be absolutely nothing that would stop you. Right. Oh, and there is a link now just been put in the site for foster care, so in the chat box, sorry, to take you to our foster care stories, which is great. Tanya, again, is there an emergency care plan in place if the carer needs an urgent break? We do our very, very best in those situations to find emergency respite. We like to try and find and build community around carers where there's some respite carers available at the drop of a hat. We do try very hard, if there is an urgent need. Sometimes that can be, depending on the complexity of the child, sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes. But if we know that it's a possibility, then that's what we build into the care plan around, if something happens and we need really urgent respite, we're able to approach or be part of that. Our Mockingbird constellation, if you were in a situation, if a foster carer came in and became part of the Mockingbird program, most definitely there is mechanisms in place that would be able to meet an emergency care need. Is furniture like beds, pushers, car seats provided, or is there assistance in getting these items? Certainly, if for prams and car seats, if you're taking an immediate placement or an emergency placement, quite often the children come with those sort of things. As part of the assessment process, there is an expectation that you would have a spare room set up, so beds and things like that are certainly something that a foster carer would be looking at providing. But if there's particular and specific things that are required for a particular and specific child, certainly everything is negotiable with the department with regards to what the department will provide and pay for. How often do full-time carers get respite? The aim is one weekend a month. Is the standard respite agreement for children and young people, and quite often a opportunity for a little bit longer during school holidays. Is there a warning when a child is needing placement, or is it spur of the moment? Depends what sort of care you sign up for, Tanya. if you're an emergency carer, we can call you at 4 o'clock on a Friday night and say, can you have a child on your doorstep in half an hour? We've got a young person. So as an emergency carer, we do ask and need emergency carers to be available from the moment a phone call is made. We do also, if you're a long-term carer, certainly we do our very best to do a transition plan where you get to know the child, and the child moves sort of in a planned way into your home. Quite often in our situation, especially at the moment with the shortage of foster carers that we have, which is quite extreme at the moment, I do find myself on a Thursday or Friday afternoon having placement services at the Department of Child Protection asking me to ask anybody who's got any room at all. So I do ring foster carers or get my staff to ring foster carers to say, is there any chance at all you could take this little poppet for the weekend, so that, you know, give the department a chance to breathe and find somewhere else. So yes, it does vary. It can, but obviously as a carer, you've got the right to say, no, I'm not in a position to be able to do that in, you know, straight away. Is it possible to be a foster carer if you're expecting yourself? Again, it's not an absolute no, but obviously when you're going to have your baby, your time and your energy is taken up initially looking after a newborn baby. So we would be very, very careful around. I don't see any reason why an assessment couldn't go ahead to see, so that when you're ready to become a foster carer, when you've had your baby and you're all settled and you're good to go, why that would preclude you from being, you know, assessed as a foster carer. But it might take just a little bit longer. We wouldn't sort of rush something like that through. And if there is a newborn needing a placement, who picks up the child, or is the child brought to them? Can be either way. We certainly have the Department of Child Protection case managers on the ground who will take a child from hospital and bring them straight to a foster carer. And sometimes the foster carer is asked if they've got the capacity to be able to go to the hospital. Some of our newborn babies stay in hospital for a little while, and while they're in hospital, we're looking for foster carers to look after them. If we've identified a good match and the child still requires medical treatment, then we're asking foster care. We create the placement before the child leaves the hospital, and the foster carer then starts to visit and be part of the exit or discharge plan for the child leaving hospital. So certainly that is a little bit away. We also have that for young children that have gone into hospital for failure to thrive and abject neglect issues, where they've had to have quite considerable medical treatment before being able to be placed into foster care. So in those situations, if we can establish a placement before they're released from hospital, we certainly would like foster carers to start to establish a relationship in the early stages. All fantastic questions. I'm really impressed with the questions that are coming up tonight. Sometimes we've got such quiet achievers sitting there in the background, but yeah, no, fantastic questions, and more than happy to answer any more if you have them, or certainly more questions. If children are cared for by grandparents or aunties, is the foster child also able to be looked after by these people? Yeah, if we do have grandparent carers and aunties who have got care of their own children or their own relative children, absolutely. But they also want to be foster carers. Is that might be what you mean? And as in if you were working. Okay, there's a couple of questions there. If you're looking after a relative child, yes, you can be a foster carer. If you are full-time work and you've got grandparents or your own parents or your sister or brother as part of your tight-knit family community, and you need your family, if your family's happy to step into the breach to look after when you're at work or for, all of that. If we can make a situation as natural as possible for a child, and if the extended family network is there and ready to embrace a young child, as part of that family network, then that is the most ideal situation for a child in care. For them to feel like they belong is really important. So the department's worked very, very hard to create a who can say okay situation or guide. Obviously, those people in your life need to have the appropriate clearances and police checks and child protection checks. But if they're all ticked off and cleared, then most definitely they can be part of the network as a natural caring network, or they can also go into for assessment to become approved as foster carers in order to be reimbursed for that care. But certainly, yes, it is available, and the more natural it feels to a young person, the better it is for that person. Right. Feel free to ask any more questions as we start to wind everything up. I don't know if there's anything any more that people need to say, but I do thank you very much for spending the time, and do absolutely ask you to share this information with your wider networks. If you hear anybody talking about foster care, even just, on the side, saying, hey, I went to this great webinar. We do these webinars every month. At the moment, they're booked for, I think, to the end of the year for the Wednesday, the last Wednesday in each month, except for December. I don't think we're doing one in December. And we are open to having that link being shared with anybody in your networks who also expresses some interest in becoming carers with Life Without Barriers. That's us, and we would absolutely love to hear from you again. What would you say was the most rewarding side of being a foster carer? Kristy, that's got to be your answer.
It's fun. It's the little everyday things, like a child coming to you and just giving a sign that they trust you, like initiating a hug when they have previously been kind of tentative, or asking for your advice or your opinion on something. For me, gaining a child's trust when you know that they find it so hard to trust anyone, but particularly adults, that to me is very rewarding. And then seeing them actually develop as a person and achieving things, becoming braver, becoming more confident, beginning to see worth in themselves, like all those little things that are actually huge in their helping their trajectory as a person. That's what it's all about.
That's great. And there's another question there. What would you say was the not so nice view to being a foster carer? We're not going to end on that note, by the way, so somebody has to come up with another question. But certainly, Kristy, you've got something there.
I guess the flip side of that is when you work so hard to provide for a child and love them and support them, and then they don't trust you because of their previous experience, because of the way their brain has formed, because of neglect or abuse or whatever, they are not able to trust you or believe you or accept your love, and that can feel like a personal rejection. So that's something that you have to be very aware of and understand the trauma and the brain and the behaviours so that you don't take it personally, which of course we're human. So sometimes it doesn't matter how much knowledge and understanding you have. Some days it is really hard and it can hurt. But yeah, when you then regroup and have someone safe that you can confide in and be encouraged by, and you get back on the right track of, no, this is all worth it, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. So we just have to keep on loving this child and making them feel safe until they can accept that.
Terrific. And then there was another question. Thank you, Tanya, for backing that up with one of the funniest moments being a foster care, surely.
I think probably two little boys that were coming to stay with us for respite. They were Indigenous boys, and they had a bit of an accent in the way they spoke, and they knew me through school initially. So they knew me as Mrs. Smith, which felt way too formal. So we were trying to come up with, like, what could they call me instead? And they decided that they wanted to call me Auntie, but their accent made it sound like Arnie. And every time they called me Arnie, I pictured Arnie Schwarzenegger. And it made me laugh every time.
That's fantastic. That's really good. Just to let you know, you're all still online. Thank you very much for staying with us. That normally we record this. I don't think the record button was hit till halfway through. So you will get some links sent to you from the last one. And we also will send you some links from our foster care ambassadors. So Kristy's one of 3 foster care ambassadors that we have, and these video links that you'll be sent are interviews with all of our foster care ambassadors that gives a real open and honest account of their experiences of being a foster care, and that's the good, the bad and the ugly, and it provides really, really good insight into what foster care is all about and the rewards that you can get from it in giving your all. So thank you, Tanya. The record was on from start to finish on my screen. Oh, well, we'll see how we go. Anyway, it's gone. Yeah, it's been going from 1:42. We'll see how it comes out from once we process and get it all set up, and we'll send out what we can, but also definitely we will be sending out some links with regard to some more stories, and feel free to call the 1300 number or take that call me back form, and somebody from the 1300 number will call you back. Thank you very much, everybody. You've been amazing and really interactive, and I've really appreciated that. And I hope you've got something to take away. And that ends our presentation. Thank you. You are very, very welcome. Something that I think that we're all really passionate about. So we love to give the time and the energy if it's going to attract more people into this valuable work. Thank you.